Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The Unlikely Encounter. Monique Jackson, a seasoned middle school teacher known for her passion for education and unwavering commitment to her students, boarded the flight with an optimistic spirit. This journey to California marked a significant milestone for her, a chance to present at a prestigious education conference, showcasing innovative teaching methods she had developed. Her enthusiasm was evident in the way she smiled politely at fellow passengers as she made her way down the narrow aisle of the aircraft. The flight was bustling with activity. Passengers were finding their seats, wrestling with overhead bins, and engaging in light chatter. Monique's seat was near the back, a window spot she had deliberately chosen to catch a glimpse of the scenery during the journey. Her carry-on bag, neatly packed, was easily stowed, and she settled into her seat with a relieved sigh. Her outfit, a crisp white blouse paired with tailored black slacks, reflected her professionalism, but her demeanor was approachable and warm. Monique always believed in the power of kindness, a value she instilled in her students. As the cabin filled, she pulled out a book from her bag, a collection of inspiring stories about overcoming adversity. She hoped to finish a few chapters before the flight landed. The flight attendants began their pre-flight safety routines. Among them was a young woman named Rebecca Stone, who had been with the airline for a little over a year. Rebecca was efficient, albeit somewhat brusque, and carried herself with an air of authority. Her sharp, almost impatient tone often rubbed passengers the wrong way, but she dismissed any complaints as trivial. Monique barely noticed Rebecca's demeanor as she adjusted her seat slightly to ease the discomfort from a nagging back injury. It had been bothering her for weeks, but her busy schedule left little time for physical therapy. A slight recline seemed like the perfect remedy. Just as Monique was about to open her book, Rebecca appeared beside her. "Ma'am, your seat needs to be in the upright position," Rebecca said tersely. Monique glanced up, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry," she replied. "I thought the plane wasn't taking off yet. I was just trying to get comfortable." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "We're about to taxi. Please adjust it immediately." Monique nodded and complied without hesitation, sensing the tension in Rebecca's voice. "Of course. My apologies." But as Monique settled back, she couldn't help but notice the pointed way Rebecca lingered, her gaze seemingly scrutinizing Monique. It wasn't the usual attentive check, there was something sharper, more judgmental in her expression. Monique dismissed the thought, chalking it up to pre-flight stress. As the plane taxied, the hum of engines filled the cabin. Monique tried to lose herself in her book, but the discomfort in her back grew unbearable. She shifted slightly, trying to find a position that didn't strain her muscles. Her subtle movements caught Rebecca's attention again. "Ma'am, I already told you to keep your seat upright," Rebecca snapped, her voice louder this time, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Monique blinked, caught off guard by the sudden escalation. "I'm sorry, I wasn't reclining it. I was just adjusting my position." Rebecca's stern expression didn't waver. "It didn't look that way. Please remain still and follow instructions." The tone, curt and unyielding, left Monique feeling a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She wanted to explain further, but decided against escalating the situation. She nodded silently and refocused on her book, ignoring the lingering stares from other passengers. As the plane ascended, the cabin lights dimmed slightly, signaling the beginning of the long flight. The atmosphere seemed to relax, but Monique's unease lingered. She wondered if she had done something to upset Rebecca or if the attendant was simply having a bad day. Either way, she resolved to stay out of her way. Several hours into the flight, meal service began. Rebecca, still managing her duties with the same briskness, handed trays to passengers with minimal interaction. When she reached Monique's row, a slight mishap occurred. A small container of salad dressing slipped off the tray and landed on Monique's lap. "Oh no!" Monique exclaimed, grabbing a napkin to dab at the spill. "It's okay. Accidents happen." But Rebecca's reaction was far from apologetic. She huffed in exasperation. You should have been more careful. Hold the tray properly next time. Monique stared at her, stunned by the accusation. Several passengers nearby exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, an older man seated across the aisle, cleared his throat as if to intervene, but Rebecca had already moved on, her demeanor colder than before. The incident left Monique shaken. She wasn't one to make a scene, but the mounting hostility was impossible to ignore. She tried to brush it off, reminding herself that the conference was the priority. Still, a part of her couldn't understand why she was being singled out. Hours passed, and the flight seemed to settle into a rhythm. Monique focused on her notes for the conference, jotting down ideas for her presentation. She was determined not to let the earlier interactions ruin her mood. Then, as she reached for her bag under the seat to retrieve a pen, the unthinkable happened. Rebecca, passing by on her way to the galley, stopped abruptly. "Ma'am, what are you doing now?" she demanded. Monique looked up, confused. "I was just getting my pen." "Is something wrong?" "You're creating unnecessary disturbances," Rebecca said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the murmurs of nearby passengers. "Please remain seated and stop fidgeting." This time, Monique couldn't hold back. "I don't understand why you're speaking to me this way. I've done nothing wrong." The calm but firm response seemed to irk Rebecca even more. Her face flushed as she leaned closer. "Are you questioning my authority?" The tension in the cabin was palpable. Passengers watched with bated breath, their eyes darting between Monique and Rebecca. It was clear this was more than a routine interaction, it was a confrontation teetering on the edge of something far more explosive. Monique took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "I'm simply asking to be treated with the same respect you show other passengers." Rebecca's response was swift and startling. In a moment of apparent frustration, she raised her hand and struck Monique lightly across the arm, not enough to cause physical harm, but enough to stun everyone in the vicinity. Gasps echoed through the cabin. Time seemed to freeze as Monique stared at Rebecca, her mind racing to process what had just happened. The flight attendant's face was a mix of shock and defiance, as if she hadn't fully registered the gravity of her actions. Before anyone could react further, a voice from the front of the cabin rang out. "Excuse me. What is going on here?" A tall, impeccably dressed woman stepped forward. Her presence commanded attention, and her tone carried authority that silenced the whispers. As she approached, Rebecca's confidence wavered. It was clear she recognized the woman, but Monique had no idea who she was. The passengers watched in anticipation, sensing that the situation was about to take an unexpected turn. The twist in the sky. The woman who had intervened exuded an air of authority that immediately shifted the energy in the cabin. Dressed in a sharp navy blue pantsuit, her presence was commanding yet calm. Her name badge gleamed in the dim cabin lights, identifying her as Renee Caldwell, Regional Manager of Operations for the airline. Rebecca's face turned pale as Renee approached. It was clear she hadn't anticipated her superior being on this flight. Monique, still reeling from the unexpected slap, looked at Renee with a mix of confusion and relief. "I asked," Renee repeated firmly, her voice measured but stern, "what is going on here?" Rebecca stumbled over her words, her usual confidence evaporating. "Ma'am, this passenger was being disruptive and refusing to follow safety protocols." Monique opened her mouth to respond, but Renee held up a hand, signaling her to wait. She turned to the passengers nearby. "Did anyone here witness what happened? Please, I'd like to hear the full story." Several passengers nodded, eager to offer their accounts. The older man across the aisle spoke first, his voice steady but firm. "Ms. Caldwell, I've been watching this unfold for hours. This young lady," he gestured to Monique, "has done nothing to warrant the treatment she's received. The flight attendant spilled something on her earlier and then berated her for it. And just now, I saw her raise a hand to this woman." Gasps rippled through the cabin again as others chimed in, echoing the man's observations. A younger woman seated nearby added, "It's true. The flight attendant has been targeting her for no reason." Renee's expression darkened as she absorbed their testimonies. She turned to Monique, her tone softening. "Ma'am, I'd like to hear from you as well. Can you tell me what happened?" Monique took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "I was just trying to get comfortable because of my back pain. Every time I adjusted, the flight attendant accused me of breaking the rules. I complied with her instructions, but she kept singling me out. When I reached for a pen under my seat, she accused me of being disruptive, and when I questioned her tone, she slapped my arm." Renee's lips pressed into a thin line, her disapproval evident. She turned to Rebecca. "Is this true?" Rebecca's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. She was being uncooperative. I was just trying to maintain order. It wasn't a slap, it was more of a... Enough, Renee interrupted, her voice sharp. What you just described is completely unacceptable behavior, regardless of the circumstances. Physical contact with a passenger in any form is a violation of our policies. Rebecca opened her mouth to argue, but quickly closed it, realizing she had no defense. The tension in the cabin was suffocating as Renee addressed the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I deeply apologize for this incident. Please know that this behavior does not reflect the values of our airline. I will ensure this matter is addressed immediately." Turning back to Rebecca, Renee's tone was icy. "Follow me to the galley. Now." Rebecca hesitated but eventually complied, her head bowed. As they walked away, murmurs broke out among the passengers. Monique sank back into her seat, her hands trembling slightly. The older man across the aisle leaned over. "You handled that with a lot of grace," he said kindly. "Most people would have lost their temper." Monique offered a faint smile. "Thank you. I just didn't want to escalate things." Meanwhile, in the galley, Renee confronted Rebecca. "Explain yourself." Rebecca fidgeted, avoiding eye contact. I was stressed. The passenger kept fidgeting, and I lost my patience." "That's no excuse," Renee snapped. "You're a professional. Your job is to serve passengers with respect and composure, not to let your frustrations dictate your actions. Do you even realize the potential consequences of what you've done?" Rebecca remained silent, her face flushed with embarrassment. Renee sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You're relieved of your duties for the remainder of this flight. Once we land, you'll report to my office for further action. For now, stay in the galley." Rebecca nodded meekly, too ashamed to argue. Renee returned to Monique, who was still visibly shaken. "Ms. Jackson," she began, addressing her by name for the first time, "I've reviewed the situation, and I want to personally apologize on behalf of the airline. This incident should never have happened." Monique appreciated the sincerity in Renee's voice, but couldn't shake her lingering unease. "Thank you, but I can't help wondering, why me? What did I do to deserve such hostility?" Renee hesitated, her expression unreadable. "Sometimes, people let their personal biases cloud their judgment, and that's not an excuse, it's a failure on our part to ensure every passenger feels safe and respected. I'll make sure Rebecca is held accountable." Monique nodded, her gratitude tinged with exhaustion. "I appreciate that." As Renee walked away, another flight attendant approached Monique with a warm smile. "Would you like something to drink, ma'am?" "On the house." Monique smiled faintly. "Tea would be great, thank you." The rest of the flight passed without incident, but the atmosphere remained tense. Monique tried to focus on her notes, but found herself replaying the events in her mind. Who was this Renee Caldwell, and why had her intervention been so swift and decisive? It wasn't until the plane landed in California that the final twist unfolded. As passengers disembarked, a small group of uniformed airline staff waited at the gate. Renee led Monique aside, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Jackson," she began, "there's something you should know. During the flight, I looked into your details to ensure we handled the situation appropriately. I discovered that you're not just a passenger, you're also an advocate for workplace equity and inclusion. Your work has been instrumental in shaping policies that ensure fair treatment for everyone. Monique blinked in surprise. You knew who I was? Not initially, Renee admitted. But once I did, it became even clearer how unacceptable this incident was. Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Jackson. You've inspired countless people with your dedication to justice, and I'm truly sorry you experienced this. Monique's surprise turned to resolve. Thank you for acknowledging it. But this isn't just about me. No passenger should have to go through what I did. Renee nodded solemnly. You're absolutely right. And with your permission, I'd like to invite you to speak at our next staff training session. Your perspective could help us prevent incidents like this in the future. Monique considered the offer, her initial shock giving way to determination. I'd be honored. As she stepped into the bustling terminal, Monique realized that what began as a harrowing experience had turned into an opportunity to make a difference. Little did she know, her story was only beginning to unfold. From chaos to advocacy. Monique Jackson walked through the busy terminal in California, the echo of the flight still lingering in her mind. Her thoughts oscillated between disbelief at the incident and a growing resolve to use the experience as a catalyst for change. A representative from the airline's public relations team met her at the gate, offering to escort her to her hotel. Ms. Jackson, I'm Lisa Harper. We've arranged a car for you and ensured your accommodations are upgraded. Please let us know if there's anything else we can do. Monique appreciated the gesture, though she knew it was damage control. She nodded politely. Thank you, Lisa. Right now, I just need some time to process. As she rode to her hotel, Monique's phone buzzed with messages. News of the confrontation had already spread, thanks to a passenger who recorded parts of the interaction. The video, titled "Flight Attendant Slaps Passenger, Airline Manager Steps In," was circulating online, quickly amassing views. Monique's inbox flooded with messages of support, curiosity, and outrage. She sighed, feeling the weight of the spotlight. While she had no intention of becoming a viral sensation, she recognized that the attention could be leveraged for good. The thought sparked an idea, one that began to form into a plan by the time she reached her hotel. The next morning, an unexpected opportunity. Monique awoke to find her name trending online. Her face, captured mid-conversation with Renee Caldwell, was plastered across news articles and social media posts. Her professional and composed demeanor contrasted sharply with the flight attendant's angry expressions, making her a sympathetic figure in the narrative. The airline had issued an official statement. We deeply regret the unacceptable behavior displayed by one of our flight attendants during a recent flight. We are conducting a thorough investigation and have taken immediate action to ensure this behavior is not repeated. Our sincerest apologies to Ms. Monique Jackson and all passengers affected by this incident. As Monique sipped her morning coffee, her phone rang. It was Renee Caldwell. Good morning, Ms. Jackson. I hope you slept well, Renee began, her tone formal yet warm. I wanted to personally invite you to a meeting this afternoon with our senior leadership team. They'd like to hear your perspective on how we can improve our training programs and ensure equity in our operations. Monique paused. The idea of facing airline executives was daunting, but she saw it as a rare opportunity. I'll be there, she replied, her voice steady. The meeting, a turning point. The meeting took place in a sleek conference room overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Renee greeted Monique at the entrance, her demeanor more relaxed, but still professional. Inside, a group of executives waited, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Monique recognized a few from the airline's website, including the CEO, a middle-aged man named Greg Whitman. He stood as she entered, extending a hand. Ms. Jackson, thank you for joining us on such short notice, he said. We've been reviewing the incident and would like to hear your thoughts on how we can move forward. Monique took a seat, her confidence growing. Thank you for inviting me. Before I begin, I want to make it clear that this isn't just about my experience. It's about addressing a systemic issue that affects many passengers and employees, bias. The room fell silent, her words cutting through any lingering formalities. Monique continued, recounting the events on the flight with poise. She highlighted Rebecca's behavior, the passengers' reactions, and Renee's swift intervention. As someone who works in education and advocacy, I've seen how unconscious biases can lead to harmful decisions, she said. The airline industry is no exception. What happened on that flight wasn't just about a bad day or stress, it was a failure in training and accountability. Renee nodded in agreement, her expression supportive. Ms. Jackson is right. While we pride ourselves on customer service, there's a gap in how we address interpersonal interactions, especially under stress. Greg leaned forward, his interest piqued. What would you suggest, Ms. Jackson? Monique took a deep breath, the words she had rehearsed on the ride overflowing naturally. Start with comprehensive training that focuses on cultural competence and emotional intelligence. Employees need to understand how their biases impact their interactions. Pair that with clear policies that empower employees to report toxic behavior without fear of retaliation. She paused, scanning the room. And involve passengers. Transparency builds trust. A system where passengers can provide feedback and see it lead to real changes would go a long way. The executives exchanged thoughtful glances, and Greg nodded. Your suggestions are insightful. Would you be willing to collaborate with us on a pilot program to implement these changes? Monique blinked, surprised by the offer. I'd be honored. But I have one condition. Name it, Greg said. That flight attendant, Rebecca Stone, shouldn't just be dismissed. She needs the same training I'm suggesting. If she's willing to learn and grow, she could become an example of change. Renee smiled, visibly impressed. That's a remarkable approach, Ms. Jackson. The ripple effect. In the weeks that followed, Monique worked closely with the airline to design a training program that combined workshops, role-playing scenarios, and open forums for employees to share their experiences. She also collaborated with psychologists and diversity experts to ensure the program was comprehensive. The airline piloted the program at its largest hub, with Rebecca Stone among the first participants. Initially resistant, Rebecca gradually embraced the training, acknowledging her biases and learning strategies to manage her emotions under pressure. Meanwhile, Monique's story continued to inspire. Invitations to speak at conferences and events poured in, including one from a global aviation summit. Her message was clear: respect and equity are not optional, they're essential for progress. A flight to remember. Months later, Monique boarded another flight with the same airline. This time, she was greeted warmly by the flight attendants, who recognized her immediately. Among them was Rebecca Stone, her demeanor transformed. Ms. Jackson, Rebecca said, her voice sincere, I want to thank you. Your patience and advocacy changed my perspective, not just as a flight attendant, but as a person. Monique smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Thank you, Rebecca. It's never too late to learn. As the plane ascended, Monique glanced out the window, a sense of fulfillment washing over her. What began as a confrontation had turned into a movement, proving that even in the darkest moments, there's potential for light. The movement takes flight. Monique Jackson's life transformed after the incident. While her primary focus remained her teaching career, she found herself thrust into a new role as an advocate for equity, fairness, and professionalism in customer service industries. The partnership with the airline became the cornerstone of a broader movement, sparking dialogues that extended beyond the aviation world. A global stage. Months after the confrontation, Monique received an invitation to the International Customer Experience Summit in Geneva, Switzerland. The event was a prestigious gathering of leaders from various industries, aviation, hospitality, healthcare, and retail, aiming to share insights and establish best practices. Monique's story had resonated with many, and the organizers wanted her to keynote the summit. The weeks leading up to the event were a whirlwind. Monique balanced her teaching responsibilities with preparation for her speech, collaborating with colleagues and industry experts to ensure her message was impactful. The airline supported her fully, offering resources and sharing their progress in implementing the training program she had helped design. The day of the summit arrived, and Monique stood on the grand stage, her heart pounding. Hundreds of attendees watched as she stepped up to the podium. She began with her signature calm and poised demeanor. "Good afternoon," she started, her voice steady. "I'm Monique Jackson, and I'm here today not because of a title or a long career in corporate leadership, but because of a moment, an unfortunate moment, that became a catalyst for change." She recounted the incident on the flight, framing it not as an isolated event but as a reflection of systemic challenges in customer-facing industries. Her story moved seamlessly into the work she had done with the airline, emphasizing the importance of cultural competence, emotional intelligence, and restorative practices. "But this isn't just about policies and training," she said, her voice rising with passion. "It's about humanity. It's about recognizing the dignity of every individual, whether they're a customer, an employee, or a leader." Her words resonated deeply, earning her a standing ovation. As she stepped off the stage, several executives approached her, eager to discuss partnerships and initiatives. The summit marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where Monique's advocacy extended to a global audience. A ripple effect in the airline industry. Back in the United States, the airline continued its transformation. The training program Monique helped design, titled Elevate, Empathy in Action, became a mandatory part of onboarding and annual recertification for all employees. The program emphasized role-playing scenarios, open discussions about bias, and techniques for managing stress and conflict. Rebecca Stone, the flight attendant at the center of the incident, became a surprising advocate for the program. After completing the training, she volunteered to share her story with new hires, candidly admitting her mistakes and the lessons she had learned. "Sometimes, you don't realize your own blind spots until someone holds a mirror up to you," Rebecca said during one session. That mirror, for me, was Monique Jackson. The program's success caught the attention of other airlines, and soon, Elevate was adapted and implemented across the industry. Monique was invited to consult with various carriers, ensuring the principles of respect and equity were embedded in their cultures. The classroom connection. Despite her growing influence, Monique remained committed to her students. She believed that her work as an advocate and her role as a teacher were deeply interconnected. In her classroom, she introduced a unit on empathy and leadership, encouraging her students to explore real-world issues and develop solutions. One day, she shared her flight story with her students, tailoring it to their age group. "What would you have done if you were in my shoes?" she asked them. A spirited discussion followed, with students debating fairness, forgiveness, and the power of standing up for oneself. Monique's favorite response came from a quiet student named Jamal, who raised his hand and said, "I'd try to help people understand each other better. That way, maybe there wouldn't be a problem in the first place." Monique smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's exactly the point, Jamal. Empathy and understanding can prevent a lot of conflict. Media spotlight and the challenges of fame." With her growing visibility, Monique became a sought-after guest for interviews and panel discussions. She appeared on major news networks, participated in podcasts, and contributed articles to prominent publications. While she appreciated the platform, the sudden fame also came with challenges. Critics emerged, questioning her motives and accusing her of leveraging the incident for personal gain. Some comments stung, but Monique remained steadfast, focusing on the positive impact of her work. "I didn't ask for that moment on the plane," she said during an interview with a prominent journalist. "But when it happened, I had a choice, to let it define me as a victim or to use it as a force for good. I chose the latter." Her resilience inspired others, particularly women and people of color, who saw her as a role model for navigating adversity with grace and strength. The legacy of change. 1 year after the incident, the airline hosted a special event to celebrate the success of the Elevate program. Monique was the guest of honor, alongside several employees who had benefited from the training. The event featured testimonials, videos, and a panel discussion highlighting the program's impact. Rebecca Stone took the stage, her transformation evident in her confident yet humble demeanor. A year ago, I made a mistake that could have cost me everything, she began. But instead of shutting me out, this program and Monique Jackson gave me a second chance. Today, I'm a better flight attendant, and a better person, because of it. The applause was thunderous, and Monique couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. When it was her turn to speak, she addressed the audience with the same warmth and authenticity that had defined her journey. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about all of us. It's about creating environments where respect, empathy, and accountability aren't just buzzwords, they're the foundation of everything we do." As she looked out at the audience, Monique felt a profound sense of fulfillment. What began as a harrowing moment on a flight had evolved into a movement, proving that even in adversity, there is potential for growth, healing, and transformation. The sky is not the limit. Monique Jackson's journey from an educator and advocate to a global change agent was far from over. 1 year after the airline incident and her subsequent rise to prominence, Monique found herself reflecting on how far she had come. Yet, she felt a stirring inside, a realization that the work was just beginning. The ripple effects of her efforts had reached far and wide, but the fight for equity and respect in customer-facing industries remained a global challenge. Monique decided it was time to expand her vision, not only for herself, but for others who had experienced similar injustices and sought actionable solutions. Founding the Equity in Action Initiative. Monique launched the Equity in Action Initiative, EIAI, a nonprofit organization aimed at addressing systemic inequities in service industries through education, advocacy, and restorative practices. The initiative's mission was clear: to create pathways for fairness, empathy, and accountability in workplaces worldwide. The EIAI offered 3 primary programs. Training and certification. The program built on the success of the Elevate initiative, offering comprehensive training in cultural competence, conflict resolution, and emotional intelligence. It was tailored for various industries, from airlines to healthcare, retail, and hospitality. Restorative practices for employees. Monique believed that employees like Rebecca Stone needed opportunities to grow rather than face outright dismissal. The program provided a safe space for employees to acknowledge their biases and mistakes, receive counseling, and re-enter their roles with renewed perspectives. Advocacy and policy change. EIAI worked with corporate leaders and policymakers to implement equitable workplace standards. It also encouraged businesses to establish transparency in handling customer and employee grievances. Monique's vision resonated globally, and partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, advocacy groups, and educational institutions followed. Within months, EIAI became a beacon of hope for those seeking practical solutions to workplace inequities. Bringing the change home. Despite her growing global influence, Monique remained rooted in her local community. She organized workshops in her hometown, inviting parents, educators, and students to participate. These sessions not only focused on fostering empathy and understanding, but also taught actionable strategies for standing up against injustice. One particularly impactful event was a panel discussion featuring Monique and Rebecca Stone. The 2 women shared their stories of conflict, growth, and eventual collaboration. Their candid conversation moved the audience, showing that even seemingly irreparable situations could lead to profound transformation. A young woman in the audience, inspired by their story, approached Monique afterward. "I work in retail, and I see situations like this all the time," she said. "How can I bring this kind of change to my workplace?" Monique smiled. "It starts with one conversation, one step toward understanding. Share your experiences, suggest training sessions, and hold your managers accountable. Change begins when you believe it's possible." Global recognition and a new challenge. The EIAI's impact did not go unnoticed. Monique was nominated for the Global Peace and Equity Award, a prestigious honor recognizing individuals who had made significant contributions to fostering fairness and understanding across cultures. At the award ceremony in Paris, Monique delivered a speech that once again captivated the world. "When I boarded that flight a year ago, I never imagined it would change my life. But more importantly, I never imagined it would change so many others' lives. What I've learned is that adversity, when faced with courage and compassion, can be the catalyst for something extraordinary. Her words were met with thunderous applause, but the moment was bittersweet. Monique realized that while much had been accomplished, the journey was far from over. She faced a new challenge, ensuring the sustainability of the movement she had ignited. The unexpected offer. After the ceremony, Monique was approached by a high-ranking official from the United Nations. The official introduced himself as Luis Ortega, the Director of Global Workforce Equity. Ms. Jackson, Luis began, your work has not only inspired us, but also shown us what is possible. The United Nations is launching a new global initiative called Workplace Dignity for All, and we'd like you to lead it. Monique was stunned. The offer was as overwhelming as it was exciting. The initiative aimed to create international standards for equity in workplaces, focusing on industries with high levels of customer interaction. Luis continued, your unique perspective, as someone who has experienced injustice firsthand and turned it into a global movement, makes you the ideal person for this role. Monique asked for time to consider. She knew the position would require immense dedication and travel, potentially taking her away from her students and the community she loved. Yet, the opportunity to create change on a global scale was too significant to ignore. A new flight path. After weeks of reflection, Monique accepted the role with a condition: her work with the EIAI would continue alongside the new initiative. She also insisted that the UN initiative prioritize collaboration with grassroots organizations and local communities. The decision marked a new chapter. Monique became a global ambassador for workplace equity, traveling to countries where systemic issues were deeply ingrained and working with local leaders to tailor solutions that respected cultural nuances. One of her first assignments was in a small, bustling city in Southeast Asia, where a hotel chain faced allegations of discriminatory hiring practices. Monique met with employees, managers, and local officials, guiding them through restorative dialogues and workshops. At the end of her visit, the hotel's CEO publicly committed to overhauling their policies and integrating equity training at all levels of the organization. It was a small, but meaningful victory, one that reminded Monique why she had chosen this path. The flight home. After months of intense travel and work, Monique found herself on a flight home. The airline, by now a shining example of transformation, had become a partner in her efforts. As she settled into her seat, she smiled at the flight attendant, who greeted her warmly. Welcome aboard, Ms. Jackson, the attendant said. It's an honor to have you with us. Monique nodded, feeling a sense of pride. The journey she had begun a year ago had come full circle. She leaned back, watching the clouds drift past the window, and thought about the road ahead. The world was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. And while the sky had once been her limit, Monique now knew it was merely the beginning.